Hi guys, Chris Turner here. This is just gonna be a quick update really about where the production's at, when we can expect the film to be released, and some information about part 2 and 3 for those who didn't know that part 2 and 3 existed. We didn't know. And if we had known, maybe we wouldn't have started in the first place. But anyway, so essentially the reason for the delay was that when we first wrote the brief for this film, we had in our minds that we knew the story. Much like many people out there, you sort of have the basic fringe knowledge and you presume that telling that story will be relatively easy. This is it appears to be an Independence type day, covert invasion that's going on behind the scenes, and it's a very negative story, which a lot of it is. What we didn't plan for was a positive, one, we didn't plan on it being a balanced film. We had no idea of that side of the story, nor had it been really represented much in other productions that I'd seen. As we all know, sort of the negative sex sells type mainstream attitude to UFOs and aliens resonates with us because that's probably what we have been made to be familiar with. It doesn't mean that this production is going to be a love and light production. It just means that in order to do the story justice, we have to talk about those more benevolent beings that play a large part in this story. Another reason, probably the main reason that it was delayed, is that we had written the brief and planned for it to be between 2 and 3 hours. We knew it would be longer than the usual 60-90 minute productions because there were various angles to cover and a lot of guests that we wanted to feature in the film. We didn't know just how complex and vast this area of research is once you scratch away the bullshit. So when we had written the brief, you can imagine we had done a linear brief for the whole film from start to finish. And we'd also written the drama, because we're doing some fictional drama for those of you who don't know, just to break up the monotony of talking heads. Now, I'm a massive fan of talking heads documentaries, provided the information and the content's there. Great, cool. I'm not a fan of, even though I'm an Ancient Aliens fan, I'm not a fan of the way they edit the films. It's just, you'll see fast cuts and flashes to half a dozen guys saying the same thing over 43 minutes, probably giving you around 5-10 minutes of information. Yes, we can do that, but instead of being a trilogy, this would have been probably 3 seasons of Ancient Aliens. So what we found is that the information and the content's there, so there are sort of long portions of talking heads in the doc. So we wanted to break that up with a fictional element. And there were, after reading Carla Turner's books and sort of Susan Reed's book, there were elements within that we wanted to sort of bring to life. And we knew that those are based on real experiences, and just because we're giving them a fictional twist doesn't mean they're any less valid or real. It just means that it's not really been done before, and in the future down the line, you know, parts of Susan Reed's book, The Body Snatchers, I'd really like to get some actors in and recreate some of that, and just put that up on YouTube, because I think, you know, that'd be really interesting and great to watch being, you know, brought to life through drama. So yeah, so there's bits of drama and bits of reenactments. Much of which you'll see in part 2 and 3, purely down to a time issue. We sort of so far behind with time, with issues with bloody 3D models, that we had a 3ds. For those of you who know 3D, we had a 3ds Max model that needed to be rendered in Maya, and we brought that in, and the rig which controls the movements of the creature has all been distorted and it's not working like it should. So little things like that. I mean, when you're talking about visual effects, not only you talk about more money, but it's more time. And when you're talking about shoots in Manchester, the rainiest bloody city in the world, when you've got outdoor shoots, you can't get them done. It's bloody pissing down. So with 10, 15 people on board with shoots and timing all this and behind the scenes, everyone has to be singing from the same hymn sheet. It isn't as easy as just making a quick doc on YouTube and using bits of research from here, there and everywhere and editing it at home. I wish it was. But anyway, nevertheless, excuses aside, that's where we're at. We're just waiting for this one animation now to come in, and then off it goes to the distributor, and it will be released as soon as. I would have thought. They want it out last week. So, and I'm sick of the bloody sight of it, if I'm honest. Hundreds and hundreds of times, watching the same thing will. I really need to get this new information out there, this part 2 out there. So yeah, that's really the reason that has been delayed. So where are we at now? Obviously now from the influx of information and comments and questions and emails and communications that I have had in the last year, part 2 and 3 were really inevitable, and that probably brings me to sort of the next thing is that I wanted to do was answer some questions and comments that had been posted on YouTube, on my Facebook, via email, and in the comment section. So one of the most common questions we get asked all the time is, are you going to feature the Jinn? Are you going to feature the Archons, demons, and make the distinction between all that? Yes, we feature the Archons heavily in part 2 and 3. For those of you that know and are familiar with it, it plays a massive part in all of this. And it's interesting that new research is coming out all the time, which is great because it gives us an opportunity to sort of include that. Those familiar with the Black Goo situation is very interesting, and the work of Miles Johnson and the Basis Projects talks about that. And that whole archontic sort of involvement, and it's so complex that it probably, again, it really deserves an offshoot production to be made specifically about the Archons. And I know that there have been docs made in the mainstream, but I think one needs making, speaking to people that they won't feature, which is usually always the case. So yes, we do feature them, and we do make distinctions between them. But it's interesting that they all bear the similar characteristics. It doesn't mean to say the same thing. It just means to say that many researchers have recognizing that they, many of them display the same physical characteristics and appearance, the way that they have been depicted in the past, the reptilian and the grey insect type appearance, spider sometimes, which ties into the sort of this parasitic, archontic visual that's being put out there by some researchers. Very interesting. Another question we get asked all the time is, where have you got the likenesses from in regards to the renders that you're creating and the special effects sculpts that you've had done? Well, they're purely from experiences and witnesses. They're not our creations. We haven't done Star Wars and sexed it up. These are purely witness accounts and using art from various people. I mean, Daniel Rogerson is a concept artist who's a co-writer in the film, which helps. But we've taken depictions from researchers like David Chase, Peter Maxwell Sottler has allowed us to look at his depictions and sort of modify them, and dozens and dozens of witness accounts online that we've been able to produce models and sculpts and renders that we think do a pretty good job I mean, there's only so many you can do, but over the 3 films, we're going to do our best to show as many as we can, because there are many. Another area that I get asked about all the time is, have you been threatened, especially with the delay on this production? Have you been threatened not to put the film out? No, not at all. There's been no sinister, malevolent warnings, no emails, no strange men in black on the corner. We have had communications disappear quite often. Emails won't arrive, files will disappear. But that can really, when you look at it, it can be put down to human error. It is odd, you know, particularly when you're dealing with certain individuals. This is reoccurring constantly, having certain issues with a couple of individuals. With, you know, communications can dry up completely, and you wonder, you know, this is odd. It's not unheard of, it happens, but nevertheless, it's a little bit strange. I've also been asked what's my background. Have I any sort of history with UFOs or aliens? No, none at all. I did have a strange thing happen when we came back from David Icke's house in the Isle of Wight. We went for the weekend and we came back, and my wife was away on holiday, so I arrived in, threw the gear in, went upstairs, had a shower and came back down to catch up on the emails. Wanted to see what I'd missed. And as I was on the laptop and typing away, and I was all of a sudden sort of glanced up and saw what I can only describe as, imagine a lightning bolt in a circular pattern, like sort of twisting and dancing around. It wasn't a ball, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't spherical in nature, it just looked like almost circular. It was just circular, like lightning sort of twisting, and it appeared for 3 or 4 tenths of a second, and at first, like anybody would, you're sort of questioning, what the hell have I just seen here? And you give the old eyes a rub, and then I sort of looked again, and it appeared again in a separate place, you know, sort of like a foot to the left of where it was. And again, just for a very short period of time, and then I never saw it again. Now, many people have asked, who have told about this, what sort of feel did it have? Did it have a sinister, malevolent feel to it? No, it had no feel to it. It was just a weird, real event. I can't really explain what it was. Maybe it was my eyes. I just don't know. I've never seen it again since. It was just odd. So if there's anyone out there that's had any experience with anything like that, just post a comment or drop me a line. Just message me on YouTube. Another thing we've been asked about is who we're going to feature in part 2 and 3. We always get emails about, oh, you should look at this research, and we appreciate all that. We look at the research of this guy, you know, this lady, and so on and so on. And we do our best. I sort of do my best to sort of contact you. I have, as I said earlier, contacted people that just won't appear in the film, and it's really disappointing when that happens. And there are various reasons for why that happens, I think. But I'm going to do my best to sort of gain people's trust, because particularly, I mean, there's a lot of issues with trust in the alternative scene. I mean, we all know there's a huge debunking disinformation campaign been going on for decades now, from when the scene first sort of had its beginnings, and that in itself is sort of a parasite, and it's sort of weeded its way into the alternative scene now, and so many people are sort of wary about dealing with production companies, no matter how sort of informal we try and be. You know, you never know what kind of approach somebody is looking for. Sometimes a real formal approach can frighten people off because they're worried that you're mainstream-like in your behaviours, and that they're going to be made a fool of. Now, they're not going to be made a fool of in the alternative scene per se, because we're all familiar with how this thing bloody works now. We're not idiots. In the mainstream, yes, but you got a bunch of sheep, you know, calling people fools. So, whilst nobody likes that kind of thing, we sort of do our best to sort of gain people's trust, and if that's something that we have to do over time and network to sort of do that, then so be it. But there are people that we're looking at to get into part 2 and 3, because we're looking particularly at another area we're looking at is the whole alien manipulation in regards to relationships, events, behaviours with individuals, ourselves, our own thoughts. And that's an area that's covered with James Bartley, Eve Logan, Tom Montauk, great researchers. So we'll be looking at sort of speaking to those guys again and getting them on board, and hopefully they'll be up for it. So and other people as well, of course, because we're going to be talking about the Archon, so perhaps we might bring in John Lash for that, and other researchers. So yeah, so we're looking at that now. So all that's in motion as we speak. What else do I get asked about all the time? What we always get asked, what angle are we coming from? What is our agenda? We don't have an agenda. I mean, that's it's such sort of a cliched thing to say, but we have literally let our research and our meetings with the experiences and witnesses sort of guide where the film goes. Yes, we had written the drama, and it has wavered from its original format, but it does feature elements of research from both sides, and everybody has this sort of, which side of the fence are you on? And I understand it, because it's sort of that's a projection of what we see in mainstream. Yes, we're living in a very negative times if you immerse yourself in that full time, and even those like myself who spend a lot of time looking at alternative news and alternative media, you know, it's rife within that as well. Sort of that fear, the content of fear and irritability more than anything. You know, more often than not, at times when the news is on the TV here, which is very rare. Sometimes in the morning when we get up early and we're having a coffee, I do find myself, I'm not the best guy in the morning anyway, but I do find myself shouting at the TV, and then suddenly you sort of think, wait a minute, you don't really function in that world anyway. So, because it's all nonsense. I mean, yes, we do where we have to, but that sort of, the whole manipulation with the war and the fear, the false flags and all that, you know, we know how it works. It doesn't make it any less annoying though. So, you know, our angle is we've just let really the people featured guide where the film goes, and the research too. I mean, I'll speak about what I think, but what I found is, because I've used change so radically from the beginning of the film, you sort of only because we're sort of early on in our research, if you like, even though it's sort of two years, if you like, that is sort of that's not a lot of time. Yes, we've had access to a lot of information and met a lot of people that some people haven't, but your opinions are constantly changing, and I think that's the way it should be. Once you sort of fix yourself in a certain mindset, you know, then you're going to start influencing the way a production turns out, an edit, you know, the way an edit tells the story, which is what we see all the time in some of these documentaries. And also, people say, who are you going to feature? What I wanted to do that nobody, as far as I know, has done in the past. I mean, I'm not saying nobody, but I'm saying what I've tried to do is feature researchers in the film that don't necessarily have a public standing, a profile, if you like, in the alternative scene. People like Richard Bruce. You know, I think Richard's one of those guys that should potentially get out there on the circuit and do some conferences. I think if someone would give him an opportunity, there's much that can be learned from Richard's research on shapeshifting, which we'll get to shortly. People like Frequency Fence, I mean, again, another shapeshifting area, because it's such a huge area and potentially deserves its own production. And I approached Kininigan, for those of you out there, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Kininigan. Kininigan, yes. But there's a lot of intrepidation, and some other guys, there's a lot of intrepidation about appearing in a production like this. People are worried about who I am, who we are, what our intentions are. And often because we're based in the UK, I feel that if we were in the States, perhaps, that it would be a little easier to gain and create a network a little bit easier, and actually meet up in person, because that meeting in person is very useful, particularly if you're Daniel, who is the co-writer, works a lot on sort of energy and, you know, gut feeling about meeting certain people, and that's very important. It's all about frequency. Consciousness and frequency in particular. But yeah, so that sort of thing happens. So we tried to do our best to bring in people that had a voice in forums and had a voice in their own research going on YouTube, for example, but hadn't necessarily been heard or seen at conferences or in books. So that's what I also tried to do. So that I try my best to sort of bring in people, and often people will drop names in comment sections and speak to this guy. Johnny Liz is another guy on YouTube. So yeah, I did my best to sort of get in touch with guys, and perhaps in the future that those guys can feature in part 2 or 3 or maybe another production. So from here, we may as well jump straight into the shapeshifting thing. Are you going to be featuring shapeshifting? Absolutely. But we're sort of limited to what we can do. We can talk about it. We can talk about how it displays itself, the whole video analysis area. What is video actually capturing? Is it the whole speed issue? Is it, you know, is it the fact that the shifting is happening, the physical shifting, or what some say is physical shifting? Is that happening on a speed basis and the camera is capturing that? Is it that something to do with light and the camera, or is it purely a DNA thing? Are people tapping into different DNA strands that are producing these effects? Is it the whole psychic effect? Are there some people that can witness it and see it and some can't? Are these people being, of course, hosted, possessed, and that, you know, these entities are entering that frequency range, and that's what we're seeing, similar to sort of the UFO sightings. Many talk about that. So yeah, that whole area is just really complex, and it's a sort of area that can be debated, and is, I mean, you type that into a forum about shapeshifting or the jinn, for example, and watch all hell break loose. Because that it will just create, that's World War III on the forums. Watch the trolls come out when you start with that. But it's just an area that's sort of little research is being done on that we know of, and probably something more scientific should be done, and that's something Richard Bruce and I talked about. And even Richard now, week after week, is producing videos and commentaries on what he thinks is happening and going on. And much like us, his opinions on what it is are changing and evolving all the time. So yeah, it's a very interesting area, but our hands are tied in terms of copyright in this, because ours is a commercial project. We can't use copyrighted materials from sort of Warner Brothers or whoever, because they won't allow it. And to buy the content, for anyone that knows, you're talking thousands of dollars for the odd second here, and then you've got to get through admin, who want to know what your project is about, and then no chance, you know. So it's a really interesting area of research, that, and you know, I think there's probably room for people to be out there on the circuit talking about that. Well, another area that we wanted to get into was the whole galactic war. Now, we know that this went on, and we see it all the time in mainstream film, in the movies, and that's been going on since 50, 60 years ago. And we see representations of that in films like Star Wars and Star Trek in particular. Jupiter Ascending is a recent one that's interesting. I mean, there's just dozens and dozens of them, hundreds of them actually. So if you don't think, you know, many people say that's bullshit. Well, if you don't like it, you do some research, because those events are very real. Those galactic wars that went on and are still raging on are very real, and human origins. It's finding the right people to talk about that on camera. We know that people like Stuart Swerdlow talk about that, and then there's a whole Archon thing that's important. We know there's people like Robert Morning Sky, who have the Terra Papers, and yes, there's a lot of debate about a lot of this Terra Papers, the Emerald Tablets. There's a huge load of debate about any of that information. But where do you draw the line with that? I mean, yes, you have to be discerning with where the information comes from, but at the same time, we know that there are elements in truth in most things, so it's just picking and taking certain details from those stories and piecing that together. We're trying to do it in a linear sort of fashion. It's very, very interesting. But that would be cool to really, that's sort of our intention, to really talk about those galactic wars and the various races involved in that. Pleiadians, Reptilians, Dracos, the Lyrans, Andromedans, the list is sort of pretty much endless. So it's really, as I say, this thing's just got completely out of control. The whole thing is just massive. Another area that we're going to talk about, that I get asked about all the time, is the MyLab phenomena and the super soldiers. Are you going to feature that? Well, yes, we are going to talk about that, because we know that the military's involvement, as always, is heavy in this. And whether you like the term super soldier or not, it's just sort of a term that sort of identifies MyLabs, and people can sort of follow that trail and then do their own research from there. We talk heavily about that. We talk heavily about alliances that have been formed with various alien races, and we also talk about the factions within factions that we know is going on. Take craft retrieval as an example. We know they're retrieving crafts. Those sort of crafts are sold to various aerospace, or the research is done sometimes by various aerospace corporations that then sell that technology and bleed it out into society. And then behind the scenes, obviously, that technology is used for secret space programs and bloody off-world stuff and all that sort of stuff, and more sinister things, but not always. So yeah, the MyLab stuff features heavily, and the military's involvement in the whole abduction phenomena is another really important area, and one that some people overlook in terms of their involvement in perpetuating this sort of fear-based situation that we're finding ourselves in constantly. It's certainly not doing us any favours, let's put it that way. That's not to say there aren't factions within the military that are totally opposed to some of the elements that are going on. There certainly are. I mean, there's wars raging in there too. And that's one of the reasons that we brought in the more positive, benevolent experiences and witnesses and stories and accounts, because in the past they'd been sort of unrepresented and misrepresented, and we wanted to gain their trust and sort of put that side of the story out there. And with the MyLab stuff, that's a very complex area of research. I mean, the abduction phenomenon is just a minefield on its own. You know, false memories and all the rest of it. Then you're dealing with military that are also that are implanting false memories, and by the time that some of these witnesses and experiences are done, they're not, you know, we don't know and they don't know just exactly all, you know, not 100% of the time anyway, we don't know exactly what the truth is and who is responsible for what and what the agenda is. But it's just something that people like Mary Rodwell are doing, and Peter Maxwell Slattery are doing more research into, and doing a good job of sort of getting to the bottom of not only their own experiences but others, and helping others draw conclusions from their experiences too. So that's cool. So thanks for listening to me waffling on about not a lot. But I figured I better put everybody in the picture since I had a lot of communication that I hadn't really responded to. And if there's anyone out there that is familiar with 3ds Max, as a user of 3ds Max Mental Ray, and that could potentially help us out with some of these rigs, these animations, by all means get in touch, post a comment, or contact me at christurnervfx@gmail.com, and hopefully you can help us out, and we can work on this together, and that'd be cool. So thanks for listening, guys. I'll be in touch with an update pretty soon. Bye bye.